All right, so we had a hatchala yesterday, or as they say, a haskalah, in a brand new section of Sefer Mada that deals with the laws of avodas kochavim. And as we mentioned yesterday, this is an anomaly. I didn't really go into much explanation, but the real um, the real truth is that the Rambam's book, Mishnah Torah, is known as a halacha sefer. It's the I don't know the first Shulchan Aruch, but it's basically a compilation of all the various Gemaras and the opinions that are cited by the Rambams are halacha. But the point of the book is to teach us halacha and not agada. No stories, no history, no niceties. It's all strict halacha. So when I mentioned yesterday that there are three exceptions to the rule, this is one. If anyone's interested, let me know, and I could tell you the other two exceptions. Don't all answer at once as to where the Rambam begins a book and he talks about the history of the halacha and not just strictly the halacha. So if you're interested, I will go over the other two locations, but I got to hear from someone. This has to be a team effort. Um, okay, so we started yesterday by saying that the movement, so to speak, of the Avodah Zarah started not in such a horrible way. It's just that they wanted the people in the time of Enosh wanted to associate with something, I guess, for lack of a better word, that they could associate with, that they could relate to. They couldn't relate to a god because they couldn't see a god. So they had to relate to what they felt was like son of God, right? Lahavdil Christianity today. And to them, it was the heavenly bodies, right? That's the way they felt they could get close to God as possible because they said, hey, God created these, right? These celestial bodies. So therefore, they must be 1 degree off from God Himself. So that's what they thought, and we're going to see in Halacha Beis that that is where everything went bad and everything spiraled out of control. We're going to start with Halacha Beis and Perek Aleph of Hilchas Avodas Kochavim. V'achar she'archu hayamim, right after many years passed, when the people in the time of Enosh, right, use the sun and the moon as gods. Amnu b'bnei adam nevi'ei sheker. So false prophets arose amongst the people. The Amru Shahel Tiva v'Amr lehem Ivdu Kochav Ploni or Kol Kochim v'Hakrivu Lai v'Naschu Lo Kach v'Kach u'Beno Lo Heichal. Everyone, all these Nevi'im came up and started making up stories and said, hey, I had a dream last night, I had an epiphany, I saw this, I saw that, and they made up all this nonsense where they said, they try to convince people, right? We call this in halacha a mesis. Remember that from Sanhedrin, a mesis and mediach, right? That was the charge that was the indictment of Jesus. He was a mesis, right? He enticed and induced others to serve Avodah Zarah. So that's what was going on over here, is that people became all of a sudden Nevi'im. Everyone thought that they were right. And they said, let's build temples, let's build sanctuaries, let's eat and drink and have parties, and let's start worshiping the sun and the moon. Umodia lahem tzura shabada malibo. And then what they did was they started making symbols, right? That's always the thing that catches people's attention is like, you know how today there's a logo, right? Every bar mitzvah has to have a logo, right? Some logos are bears, some logos are Max Burgers, right? Other right. So a logo is very very important. It's something that you could relate to. So they started making these little figures, right, and showing people. For Omer Zohi Tzuras Hakochav Ploni, right? They would make a star, they'd make a pentagram, they'd make whatever, and they said this is the Tzura right? This is the figure of this star, Shehudiyuhu ben Avoso. This is what the vision I had, and here's the Avodah Zarah to bow down to. Here is a figure, and this represents this specific star. And the Rambam continues with the history, and he says that they began to make all these posters and these pictures in their buildings and their temples that they built. Petachas ha'ilanos, under the trees, a little reference to the Asherah tree, if you remember that. Uberoshe haharim, and on the mountaintops, vel hagvos, umiskabtsin, right? Points of nature, right? Beautiful places, right? They took advantage of nature, and they depicted these Bubba mices in the nicest places on earth to dress it up, right? Gvarim, Gvos, in the valleys, Umiskapsim, Mishtachvin Lehem, and they had parties over there, and they bowed down to them. For Omim Lakol Ha'echad Shazo Hatzura Meitivu Maria, this tzura, this symbol that I have nailed to the wall, this is going to make you good. This is going to make you bad. This is going to control you. And this is going to be the new God. Wow. The Kohanehem, Omrim Lahem, and the priests, right, the head influencers over there would say, Shabavodazu, Tirbu v'tatzlichu, v'asu kach v'kach, v'atu kach v'kach. This is the way to live. This is the way you're going to be successful. This is the way you're not going to be successful. And this is what you should do. This is what you shouldn't do. And they made their own, basically, they made their own Shulchan Aruch over there. And these are the rules to abide with. And then other foolish people and liars got up and they said, right? I heard it from God. I heard it from the star himself, right? And they made up these fantastic, right? These fantasy sub-religions, Ogagol, Malach, Dibar, and everyone claimed that they got the word of God. Right, this is like Jonestown, right? 1979. This is all over again, right? This is what these cults. So this was in a sense the first cult, right? People got up and they claimed that they heard the word, right? And these influencers basically said, "This is how we're going to serve this God." Again, these are the rules and regulations. Upashat avarzeh b'chol ha'olam la'avodas hatzuras ba'avodas mishuna zo mizu, and this spread like wildfire, right? That now, keep in mind, the world was not, like it is today, where we had 8 billion people. So the Rambam is saying that the entire world was basically under this, right, drinking the same Kool-Aid, right, under the same influence. Now, I don't know how many people were alive back then. It's probably possible to figure out if you open up a Sefer Bereshis and you start doing some math. There weren't millions of people, right? Probably thousands, but not millions. We're not going to talk about cavemen and all kinds of other, debatable and difficult topics. But anyways, so this spread like wildfire. To serve all of these Avodah Zarahs that are different, and to bring karbanos, the kevan she'arku hayamim nishtakach Hashem hanichvet v'hanora. And after a while, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or as we call him, God Almighty, was ancient history, long forgotten. Mipi kol hayakum, the population forgot God. Midaitam v'lo hikiruhu, right? God was irrelevant. The only thing that was relevant were what people could see and feel and what they felt they could benefit from, the sunlight and the moon and the stars, things that that actually is tangible to them. V'lo hikiruhu, they didn't recognize God. V'imtzu kol ha'am hanashim v'haktanim einim yodim el hatzura. The whole population, everyone, man, woman, child, old, young, they only knew these tzuros, these figures, shal eitz v'shal even, v'ha'heichal shal avanim, and these temples that they built. right? You've seen pictures of these ziggurats that they, right, in that they found, right? This is basically what they started to build. Shenichnachu mikatnusam, that they were indoctrinated from a young age, liishtachavos la, to bow down, ula avda, ulihishava bishma, and they started even using the name as like a name of God that you would swear by. That's how far they took this made-up religion. And the wise men who were following this religion, who believed in it, right? I mean, it sounds like the Rambam is repeating himself a little bit. He's trying to drive home the point that everyone, this was everywhere. This was ubiquitous, right? They all, they all pretended that there was no God. Right? And they made these tsuros, right? They wanted like a pocket moon. So you can't have the moon, it's way too big and too inaccessible. So everybody made a little moon for their keychain, right? And that's what they walked around with. And to them, this represented a god. The real God in heaven, as we know him, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, nobody recognized. Nobody had anything to do with him. He was long, long forgotten. The lo yodu ela yechidin ba'olam. So you may say to yourself, come on, there had to have been a few good people, right? In all these horrible stories, there's always a tiny glimpse of optimism. So the Rambam is about to name some famous people who survived and did not fall for this nonsense. Who are these Yechidin? Kegon Chanoch, Metushelach, Noach, Shem, Ve'ever. Okay, Chanoch. Now, Chanoch is, there were actually two Chanochs, right? The answer to the trivia question of who was the first name in the Torah to have two names, to have two people with the same name. So in Sefer Bereshis, there are actually two Chanochs. One is the son of Cain. He wasn't that great. Remember, the pasuk says that Cain went and he built a city for Chanoch, his son. So that was one Chanoch. Then there was another Chanoch that came from Shet, right? And he was one of the generations of the 10 generations from Adam, right? As we mentioned yesterday, Adam, Shet, Enosh, and then you go down, and then you have Chanoch. He was number 4 or 5. Umetushelach, right? Famous Metushelach, Noach, Shem, Ve'ever. Noach, Shem was his son, and Aver was not his son. Aver was another person, and Shem and Ever, established what they called the first yeshiva, whatever that means. So there were 5 people that were notable. And this is how it worked. This was the way of the world until the year 1948, which is the Jewish year that Avraham was born. But pretty much when this started in the days of Enosh, which is, I don't know exactly, I could find out, it's somewhere between 8 and 900. So for basically 1,000 years, right, Reuven had a son Chanoch, and then there's a 4th Chanoch also. One of the later generations also. There's actually 4 Chanochs in in Sefer Bereshis. That's a trivia question for the most common name in the Chumash, if that ever appears in jeopardy. You could say you heard it here first. So all of this Narishkeit prevailed for about 1,000 years until Avraham was born. Now, I just want to end on, we mentioned the name Chanoch. So what is interesting about Chanoch? Well, what's interesting about Metushelach is we know that he holds the record for the longest life of 969, right? But Chanoch is an interesting fellow. Chanoch makes a list that I'm about to quote. We haven't quoted from this Masechta in about 3 years, if you remember. I'd be absolutely shocked if anybody remembers when the last time I quoted a Mishnah from Meseches Derech Eretz Zuta. Raise your hand if you remember the date 3 years ago that I quoted that. Okay, I didn't think so. But there is a Mishnah. Let me open it up. Maseches Derech Eretz Zuta is a Masechta, what they call Masechtas Ketanos, that appear in the back of Avodah Zarah. And it's not really well learned, but if you have a Sefaria, it's very easy to get. So the end of Maseches Derech Eretz Zuta, in the first chapter, the very last Mishnah states as follows: Tes nichnasu b'chayehen b'gan Eden. There are 9 people, right? We love lists, right? We have a list of people. We have a list of great people. We have a list of bad people, right? And Sanhedrin talks about the list of people who don't have Olam Haba. Then there are good lists, and there are other kinds of lists. But there are 9 people, 9 men, or 9 people that entered Gan Eden alive. That's another way of saying 9 people did not die. Now, don't get this confused with the list of the 4 people who never sinned, right? That's the Gemara in Bava Basra, right? Daf Tezayin or so. But this is a different kind of list. So who never died? Rather, they went up alive. Veluhen Chanoch ben Yered. Here we go. Number 1 in history is Chanoch, the son of Yered, right? He's, again, a grandson of Sheth. The Eliyahu Hanavi, Umoshiach, okay, and the Mashiach, I'm not going to touch that one. The Eliezer Eved Avraham, number 4 is Eliezer, believe it or not. V'chira Melech Tzur, he's not a household name. The Eved Melech Akushi, right? Eved Melech was the king of the Kushites. He's somewhere, I think somewhere at the end of Malachim he's mentioned. Then we get to more contemporary people. The Yavetz beno shel Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Okay, Yavetz, the son of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. And now, believe it or not, we have 2 women. Does anybody want to guess who the 2 women of the 9 who never died to win the grand prize? Okay, everybody's shy tonight. Batya Bas Paro. Okay, she comes in at number 7. The Serach Bas Asher. Right, we all know the fame and the lore of Serach, the daughter of Asher. The Yesh Omrim, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. This famous story of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi who went up, the Gemara in Ksuvas, it's a Gemara in Pesachim, where he says, I saw what goes on upstairs, and Olam Hafuch Ra'iti, right? That's the whole famous Olam Hafuch Gemara. I believe that was said by Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi also has the distinction, if this ever comes up in jeopardy, he's the only Tana and Amora. He's the only Amora to ever be mentioned in a Mishnah in all of Shas. So that's the other nugget of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. He appears in the very last Mishnah in Uktzin that people make a siyum on. Okay, so why did I bring this up? To tell you that Chanoch, right? It's Chanoch is what's said about Chanoch is ve'einenu ki lakachoto Elokim. If you look in the Rashi in Parshas Bereishis, Rashi explains that he lived 365 years. I think I remember that, right? The way to remember it is how many days a year. He lived 365. And Rashi explains that he started to, hang out with the bad crowd. And God was worried he's going to be influenced. So in order to save him, he took him up and, saved his life. And he went into Gan Eden. And that was it. And by the way, there's a lot to talk about in the Tushalach also. We just don't have time. And it's not really relevant, but he is very, very interesting. There's a couple Gemaras about him. If you're interested, I could tell you where to look. It says he became Matatron, the angel Metatron. So there's a lot to talk about. But it's 8:20, and that's it. We did one halacha tonight. And tomorrow, hopefully,